Prince Louis is clearly a delightful character. He's full of energy, he's full of beams. He clearly finds these photo opportunities very exciting.
Welcome to an unforgettable moment that will leave you stunned. Imagine being a young royal child, thrown into the spotlight, only to be dismissed in front of an entire room of guests, until the unexpected happens. Prince Louis, the youngest of the royal family, faced a challenge that no one saw coming. A famous pianist mocked him, a joke at his expense that could have been the end of it. But what happened next is nothing short of incredible. This is the story of how one brave child turned mockery into triumph, silencing the doubters and proving that even the youngest members of the royal family have hidden depths of talent and strength. You won't believe what Prince Louis did next, an astonishing moment that changed the narrative forever. But before we dive into this jaw-dropping tale, make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a thrilling, exclusive story about the royal family. Trust us, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Let's dive into this unforgettable moment at Windsor Castle. It was a quiet afternoon at Windsor Castle when Prince Louis, the youngest member of the royal family, found himself at the center of an unusual moment. Surrounded by a select group of distinguished guests, including a famous pianist known for his technical mastery, Louis was simply there, quietly observing, as royal children often do, untouched by the weight of expectations that their public roles sometimes impose. This royal gathering was not a concert nor a performance, but a carefully planned afternoon where guests were invited to admire the grandeur of the palace and enjoy an afternoon tea, all while leaving with good stories to tell. The famous pianist, however, wasn't just a guest. He was an artist renowned for his precision, discipline, and his critical views on what it meant to truly master music. His world was one of high standards, excellence, and almost unforgiving rigor. He regarded music as more than just art. It was a matter of exacting discipline, a realm where there was little space for error, especially not for children, in his opinion. Prince Louis, just 7 years old, had been brought into the room briefly, as children of royal families often are, seen but not expected to take center stage. He was there to greet the guests, smile for the cameras, and embody the innocence and energy of youth. As usual, he had no problem drawing attention with his lively personality. He was known for his mischievous waves to the cameras, his impish faces on palace balconies, and the way he never seemed to stand still, a characteristic that made him a favorite of both the media and the public. But no one had asked why that boundless energy existed in him or what it meant. Why was he always so lively, so energetic? What motivated him to act out in front of the camera? And what did it say about him when no one was watching? Little did anyone know that the simple moment that was about to unfold in Windsor Castle would soon become a significant turning point in Louis's life, and one that would have repercussions far beyond what anyone anticipated. The pianist, known for his sharp wit and biting opinions, had been charming the room with his mastery of music and his humorous anecdotes. When his eyes landed on Prince Louis, who was quietly standing in the corner of the room, he couldn't help but comment on the boy's playful demeanor. With a slight tilt of his head and a thin smile, the pianist addressed Louis in a light-hearted manner. "Ah, this must be the lively one," he said, garnering a few chuckles from the guests. The smile on his face wasn't the kind one would expect from someone fond of children. It was a knowing grin, the kind that preceded a playful, sometimes teasing remark. He then glanced at the grand piano in the corner of the room. It was an ornate, polished instrument, more a decorative piece than a functional one in that moment. "Does he play?" the pianist asked, his voice casual but with an unmistakable tone of amusement, as if the idea of a young royal being a musician was, in his eyes, almost a laughable notion. Louis's father, Prince William, quickly answered, "Not formally, since he's still quite young," trying to defuse the situation. But the pianist wasn't satisfied with the easy out. He turned back to Louis, his eyes gleaming with a thinly veiled amusement. "Shame, such small hands. But I suppose every royal child thinks they can play before they truly understand what music demands," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. The room responded with polite laughter, the kind reserved for jokes that aren't truly funny but are meant to show that the speaker is in control of the room. Louis, however, didn't laugh. Though he didn't fully understand the words, he understood the tone, and it stung. He was just a child, but in that moment, he felt a tightening in his chest, a sensation he had often experienced in such situations but never fully understood. It wasn't the warm, kind smile of an adult trying to connect with a child. It was the kind of smile that signals a joke at someone else's expense. As the pianist continued to look at him with a smirk, he made a suggestion that seemed, on the surface, innocuous but was anything but. "Well, why don't we hear something? Go on, young prince, show us what you've got," he said with an air of mockery that made the room fall silent. All eyes turned to Louis. The pressure was immense. The expectation of a child who had been thrust into the spotlight, not out of choice, but out of the roles expected of him, was palpable. Louis's face turned red. He looked at his parents, at his mother, Catherine, for reassurance, and at his father, William, for support. No one intervened. No one stepped in to protect him. "I don't," Louis whispered, shaking his head slightly. But the pianist, unwilling to let the moment pass, waved him off and insisted, "Oh, it's just a few notes. It's only a piano. Don't be shy." This was the moment of expectation. The pianist's challenge had crossed the line from playful to cruel, and Louis felt it. Despite his desire to retreat, despite his overwhelming need to escape from the spotlight, Louis stood frozen. He had never touched that piano before, not in front of an audience like this. His fingers curled into his palms, and his heart raced. He felt exposed, vulnerable. This wasn't just a game anymore. It was a test he wasn't prepared for. His small shoulders, usually carefree, felt heavy under the weight of the eyes upon him. But Catherine, sensing her son's discomfort, spoke gently. "You don't have to, Louis," she said softly. But by then, the damage had already been done. The moment had already been placed in motion, and Louis could feel it. The silent pressure that every royal child knows too well, being too much to ignore, but never quite enough to fulfill the expectations placed on them. If you're loving this story so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on incredible royal moments like this one. The pianist's words, spoken lightly in jest, began to sink in. "Children are better suited to waving than playing," he remarked with a smile that had grown colder. More laughter filled the room, but this time it was louder. Louis felt the weight of it, a sharp contrast to the warm laughter that used to follow his own playful gestures. He didn't cry, and he didn't run. He simply nodded his head and took a step back, folding his hands the way he had been taught in royal protocol. The room quickly moved on. The guests returned to their conversations, sipping tea and nibbling on pastries, completely oblivious to the quiet turmoil that had just unfolded before them. But for Louis, something had shifted. That night, as the palace settled into the silence of the evening, Louis lay awake in his bed, replaying the moment over and over in his mind. The words of the pianist echoed in his ears, and the hurt, though unspoken, was deep. But what the pianist and the adults in the room didn't realize was that Louis wasn't defeated. In the face of their mockery, Louis found a new resolve. What no one knew was that he already understood the piano. Not the grand one in the corner of the room, but a different one, a forgotten one, hidden away from the eyes of the world. That piano didn't laugh or mock. It listened, and it was there, in the quiet solitude of that hidden room, that Louis began to teach himself to play, learning the instrument on his own terms, away from the expectations of the public and the pressures of royal life. After the incident at Windsor Castle, Louis became more determined than ever. Though the royal family's world was full of rehearsed elegance and perfection, Louis had found his own refuge, a small tucked-away room in the north wing of Windsor Castle. This room, long forgotten by many, became his sanctuary. It was in this hidden space, far from the eyes of the media and the strict expectations of royal life, that Louis discovered something profound. He discovered his own voice, not through the usual channels of royal duties, but through something personal, private, and powerful, the piano. The old upright piano in the room was far from perfect. It was worn and aged, with chipped ivory keys and a faint stain from decades of use. The piano had character, just like Louis. It creaked when you pressed the pedals, and the keys sometimes stuck, resisting the touch of inexperienced fingers. But to Louis, it was more than just an instrument. It was a companion. It was a symbol of his own struggle and growth. Every time his fingers brushed the keys, he could feel the piano's imperfection echo his own. Louis had no formal lessons, no tutors to guide him. Instead, he learned by ear, using whatever books he could find in the palace library. His fingers had grown used to the weight of the keys, the movement of his hands, and the rhythm of his breath. Every day, he would sneak away to his secret room and play in silence, honing his skills in the quiet spaces of his childhood. As he grew more confident, the pieces he played grew longer and more complex. He wasn't just pressing keys, he was making music that came from a deep place inside him. It wasn't long before Louis started to notice something that the adults around him missed: the power of silence. The piano didn't judge him. It didn't expect him to be perfect, and it didn't demand that he perform for an audience. It gave him the freedom to explore, to fail, and to succeed, all on his own terms. This was a revelation for Louis, who had always lived under the spotlight of the royal family. His energy and his playful nature had always drawn the attention of the public. But this was different. The piano gave him the opportunity to be himself without the burden of external expectations. As Louis's practice continued in the secret space, something subtle began to change within him. His parents, William and Catherine, started to notice. They had always been proud of Louis's spirited personality, but lately, he had seemed quieter, more introspective. His usual energy was still present, but there was something more to him now. A deeper sense of calm, a focus that had previously been absent. One evening, William mentioned to Catherine, "He's different lately. He seems more settled, like he's carrying something inside him." Catherine agreed, but both of them remained unaware of the full extent of Louis's transformation. They didn't know that their youngest son had spent hours in his secret room, teaching himself to play the piano with an intensity that would surprise anyone who knew him only as the cheeky royal child who loved to make faces at the cameras. Their observations of Louis's growing maturity came as no surprise to those who had observed him closely. His practice sessions, however, were not intended for anyone's approval or recognition. Louis's playing was personal. It was about proving something to himself, not to the world. And so, the days turned into weeks. Louis's confidence grew. His playing was no longer tentative, but purposeful. Each note he played carried meaning. He wasn't just pressing the keys, he was expressing a part of himself that had long been hidden from the public eye. The pianist's words, the ones that had mocked him, that had made him feel small, became a driving force in his self-improvement. He wasn't just playing music anymore. He was proving to himself that he could defy the expectations set before him, that he could be more than the royal child everyone expected him to be. If you're loving this story so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on incredible royal moments like this one. One day, King Charles mentioned that the royal family had received an invitation to the prestigious International Harmony Gala, a classical music event held at the iconic Royal Albert Hall in London. This gala was not just any event. It was one of the most respected evenings in the classical music world, where the most famous pianists, critics, and patrons gathered to celebrate excellence in music. The guest list included some of the world's biggest names in the classical music world, including the same pianist who had once mocked Louis at Windsor Castle. When Louis heard this, a strange feeling stirred inside him. He wasn't just nervous, he felt a challenge rising within him. This was his moment, the one he had been waiting for, even if he didn't fully realize it. Catherine noticed Louis's reaction and asked, "Do you think you'll be all right, darling? It will be a very formal evening." Louis nodded, but inside, he knew something was shifting. This gala wasn't just another royal event. It was a chance for him to prove that he was more than just a boy who had been dismissed in front of a room full of adults. Louis didn't want to draw attention to himself. He didn't want to make a scene, but he knew deep down that this was his chance to reclaim something he had lost, a sense of dignity, of self-worth. He wasn't trying to make a spectacle of himself. He simply wanted to show the world that he was capable of more than they had ever thought. The night of the gala arrived, and with it, an air of tension that Louis could feel the moment he stepped inside the Royal Albert Hall. This wasn't like other royal events. This was an evening that celebrated perfection, discipline, and the very essence of classical music. The grandeur of the hall and the expectation of excellence weighed heavily on Louis, but he was determined to face it head-on. As the evening unfolded, the pianist who had mocked Louis weeks earlier took the stage. His presence was commanding, and the audience gave him a polite but warm applause. He sat at the piano, prepared to deliver a performance that was expected to be flawless. But Louis, sitting quietly among the royal family, could sense something was wrong. The pianist, usually so confident, began his performance with a slight hesitation, a small mistake that, while unnoticed by most, was keenly felt by those who knew music. The pianist's usual control slipped. The tension in the room was palpable, though no one spoke it aloud. Louis, however, sat still, listening intently. He understood the music, even if he couldn't fully articulate it. He heard the hesitation, the discomfort in the pianist's fingers as they struck the keys. Louis had been there. He had experienced that feeling of uncertainty, of not being sure if you could meet the expectations placed upon you. But Louis, unlike the pianist, had a secret. He had been practicing not for approval, not for recognition, but for himself. He had spent hours perfecting his playing, learning to make the piano his own. And so, as the pianist continued his performance, Louis's quiet rebellion began. He stood up, his heart racing, and walked toward the stage. The room fell silent as Louis made his way to the piano. His parents exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what was happening. The pianist, caught off guard, watched Louis approach the piano. His mind still expected hesitation, nervousness, or perhaps even an apology from the young prince. But Louis did none of that. He sat down at the piano, his small hands hovering over the keys. The room waited in a tense silence. What happened next was nothing short of extraordinary. Louis, despite his age and the pressure of the moment, played with confidence. The first note was soft, but it carried weight. It was deliberate. Each note he struck was measured, purposeful. The room, which had been holding its breath, was now hanging on every note. The pianist, who had once dismissed Louis as a mere child, felt his confidence waver. This wasn't a child playing for fun. This was someone who knew what they were doing. The music flowed from Louis's fingers with the kind of quiet strength that left the audience in awe. When he finished, there was a moment of complete silence. The room, which had expected to see a child fumble, was now witnessing something completely different. Louis had done more than just play the piano. He had redefined himself in front of everyone who had underestimated him. The applause that followed wasn't loud or enthusiastic at first, but it was slow, deliberate, and respectful. The pianist, unable to hide his surprise, simply said, "I was wrong." It wasn't an apology, but a recognition, a moment of humility from someone who had once dismissed a child. Louis, unsure of what to do next, simply lowered his head and bowed. His heart raced, but he had reclaimed his dignity, his confidence, and his self-respect. Catherine was the first to reach him, kneeling to embrace him, while William placed a hand on his shoulder. The evening had shifted, and the monarchy had witnessed a quiet but profound moment of growth. And just like that, Prince Louis showed the world that even the smallest voices can echo the loudest in the face of doubt. This was not just a child's performance. It was a message to the world that even those who are underestimated can rise to the occasion. Louis had taken a moment of mockery and turned it into a lesson of resilience, patience, and self-belief. Louis proved that true talent doesn't need to shout. It simply plays, and the world listens. In the days that followed, the media buzzed with speculation and admiration for Louis's unexpected performance. But what mattered most wasn't the applause, the press, or the recognition. It was the quiet moment of self-discovery that Louis had experienced. He had faced the expectations of the world and, in doing so, had shown everyone what he was truly capable of. What do you think of Prince Louis's unexpected performance at the International Harmony Gala? Do you believe he inherited his musical talent from Princess Diana? And what can we all learn from Louis's determination to prove himself? Drop your thoughts in the comment section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. Stay tuned for more, and thanks for watching.